Everyone. I'm Rufus, and this is my colleague Daniela from Datopian. And this is AI Learn Today, where we explore a kind of pretty raw way, our own experience of going through the AI revolution, of what tools are working, particularly with a focus, well, AI in general, and also AI and data, which is kind of Datopian's expertise. And, trying ourselves, the questions we're coming up with, how you apply it in your life, how you apply it in an organization, how you apply it for work, for doing whatever you want to do. So, what would you like to talk about today, Daniela?
I think what I'd like us to kick off today with is I spend a lot of time in ChatGPT or other AI tools nowadays, and every time I explore an idea, and sometimes I love brainstorming, just brainstorming with the AI. And the AI gives me, more branches, more variations, more possibilities. So instead of reducing the complexity, I feel like I'm multiplying it. And the key problem is it just feels like the possibilities are growing faster than my ability to execute or decide. And then we can connect this to the other topic we briefly touched upon, which is the memory and that the fact that AI keeps forgetting.
Yes.
So I think that's the main thing we can start with and then see how it goes.
Yeah. Oh, great. So, maybe do you have a concrete example in your mind?
I think a good candidate could be creating an AI sales funnel, for instance, and automating it. Okay. And so imagine, I'm trying to build an AI powered sales funnel. And it sounds straightforward. There should be some steps, something like, I don't know, you're capturing the leads, you're qualifying, following up, conversion, so on and so forth. But then I start very simple. What would the sales funnel look like, or help me design an AI sales funnel? And then AI starts giving me 5 different funnel structures, asking me questions to understand more about the context, inbound versus outbound strategies. It's giving me different channel approaches, email versus chatbot versus some hybrid options, and then so many different directions that I get overwhelmed. I don't know where to go because I want to answer all of these questions, and I want to get the clarity, and I actually like a lot of the suggestions, and then should I dig deeper into this suggestion? But then I also wanted to look into the other thing, and then this is the moment where I start copy and pasting into documents, especially if I want to capture something and I feel like I'm going to lose it.
So, that's a great example, Daniela. And it's kind of what I want to say, we can call it like the diamond problem, kind of opening up the kind of, in the classic diamond, you start from a question or a problem and you start researching or, exploring. And then there's this point where you've opened everything up and you want to reconverge. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the missing part, and it also reminds me of the internet in general and Wikipedia and things like that. Being where I was wondering, like, I'm interested in some topic, and then I end up on Wikipedia, and then I found, oh, but there's a link to something interesting in this article, and then before I know it, I'm like 10 links down, and I'm like, what was I even trying to look at originally? And I, do find that can happen also with AI, but because it's got such a big knowledge base, and before I know it, I'm like somewhere down some chain of exploration, and I've kind of forgotten how that went back to the beginning, or I've lost track of that. And the other aspect you're saying is you kind of generate so many documents or research threads or kind of things, and you kind of actually, rather than ending up with an answer, you end up with like more materials that you need to digest than you had before.
Exactly. This is describing it very well.
My experience of AI, even now when it's got a lot better, is that with generic questions, and we could pick even a more concrete one like the other day, or even something like, I want basically to kind of organize all my photos on my hard disk, and I need a tool for this. You could pick any kind of things you tend to ask. You get quite generic, and not so useful responses, and even ones which expand when you've got particularly a big problem like an AI sales funnel. Um, because what I would sometimes say is the AI is often synthesizing a lot of information. It's often going out on the internet and reading things, and it itself is getting a bit overwhelmed often.
Mm.
And so you need some kind of, there's two things I think you often need. One, you want some kind of process yourself for how this kind of work goes. Um, and I'll come to that, but like the situation, complication, question, hypothesis, structure, and other things about what you're trying to do. And then also you want, maybe the most important thing is kind of your own context. Generally, the more knowledge you as a user have, particularly like big picture knowledge about the domain and choices that you want to make, the better. And even if you have some judgment, for example, if you know something roughly about how AI sales funnels should work, you're going to have a lot better job building one. Not you need to know the detail for your organization, but you can spot when it's making errors or guide it in ways you want it to go. Whereas if you know nothing, you can often be in a bit of trouble because basically it's not necessarily going to do hallucinate or do things wrong, but it just won't. You can't really direct it because you don't know what anything should look like. It's like trying to get it to build a house. Yes, it has all the knowledge of humanity online about how to build houses, but you knowing how houses should be built means you can spot when there are real errors, like, hey, there are no windows, or or but I wanted the house to be like this, or maybe it's not anything wrong. But it's like, oh, but I actually knew I wanted the house like that. Um, so, and finally, which comes to the memory point, is like the process of actually using the AI, which I would call the way that you prompt, the way you get it to ask you questions, the way you get it to basically do brainstorming, and the way that you do checkpointing for memory as you go through that process, particularly for larger problems, whether we're talking about building an app, whether you're talking about doing strategic research, any of these things, you're going to exhaust the memory of the agent. Even things with very large context windows. Now I'm saying I've got a million token context window. Certainly now there's on Gemini's had that for a while. Claude now have it for Mac subscribers. OpenAI are opening up. The truth is, even like halfway to the context window, there's often degradations in performance and things like that. And then you get compaction and things happening. So this ability to distill as you're going through the process, useful insights from what you've done and kind of checkpoint that in, so you're saving that to a disk, to basically files that can then be reread in fresh sessions, is very helpful. It's also a good test because when you come to do other work later, you can reboot in a clean way. But let's just start very, very briefly. And maybe I start in the midpoint, actually, on the last point of not just the checkpointing, but how you prompt. So one is that there are a bunch of brainstorming, basically, skills. So a skill, if you don't know what a skill is a kind of prompt, basically just this is a prompt for the AI that's good at helping you do things. And they started really encoding was they worked out that it was much better if you had the AI agent, work with you to design create a kind of design document and a product requirement document and an implementation hand before you build, rather than just say, build me a snakes and ladders game. If you do this brainstorming at the beginning, it's a lot better, basically, for you, because you actually do basically job requirement, you do job stories properly or whatever it is, and for the AI. And what's cool is those have got pretty refined, and you can use them. You don't need to just use them for coding. You can use them for anything. And for example, there's a very popular one called Superpowers from a guy called Jesse Obra/Superpowers on GitHub. And they're now almost built in. Their Claude had this planning feature, many of the AI coding harnesses like OpenCode have this built in. And, in a simple way, making you write out at the beginning like a vision, brainstorming what you actually want to do, asking you multiple choice questions. And you can prompt the AI to kind of do what these skills do. And one of the most useful things is tell the AI to act as like a world-class kind of business needs analyst, for example, about, start out, right, let's come to your concrete example. Rather start out and say, I want to build an AI sales funnel. We say, listen, we've got this sales funnel. I want you first to help me analyze my business problem, and then we're going to build. We want to use AI to improve our sales funnel handling, but I want you to first be a world class kind of business analyst and kind of strategic analyst, and I want you to ask me multiple choice questions one at a time to help me clarify our needs. And I want you to stop when you feel we've got a clear enough description of a problem to start moving towards researching a solution. But I want you to first do that. And, normally that will produce you a README or a vision document or some other document that would even be the booting point of your next thing. So that would also be your like memory checkpoint at the end of that process. And I can't emphasize this enough, I guess, for me, which is, in my view, doing this work, which can often take an hour or two, in my experience, is, you can one-shot things where you just like write one thing out and it will build something. But for most interesting stuff you're doing in your organization, this work, and the thing is, it does demand cognitive skills and some knowledge of your business problem. You can kind of bootstrap sometimes by doing something very simple, then doing research, and then coming back and doing the process. So that's point one. And that relates also to having business context for what you're doing.
That's been very useful. And one thing that I've just been reflecting on while you were talking, because I tend to think a lot in general, not just within the AI. I keep asking myself this many questions and going in different directions and exploring. So I do tend to spend a lot of time in this brainstorming or getting the clarity phase. So I think what you're saying is making a lot of sense and is probably going to be useful for me, and even to do some prep ahead of the actual session before using the AI.
Just to say, I would say that diving in is very attractive in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
The more my greatest thing at the moment is just use it, like actually very, very early on. And sometimes I overthink thinking about, I would say, because I can use it even at the very beginning. You can say things like, I don't know what I'm doing. Then I would be upfront. Should I start this way or that way? And I find also asking it to guide me. So what I also find is when there are, for example, multiple choice questions, I don't know the answer, I tell it to give me its recommendation. And then actually I either might agree with it, or it might prompt me to be realized like, no, I don't want that. I wanted something else. So here's maybe I can just very quickly share an example for building a little tool, a micro tool the other day, which was, let me see, do I don't have that. I'm going to take the entire screen. This was building, I'm building on the command line, but you could do this in Claude Desktop. You could do this in the Codex tool from ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. But basically at the beginning, I'm saying I have a problem, which is I do a lot of writing with AI and I want it to sound like me. And I'm just like outflowing here. And I had got some thought about this before, it's true. And I said, but basically I'm just outflowing, like I want to sound, and I then tell it what I want you to do here. First, what I want to even do here is I want you to write out the kind of need that we're describing here into the README. So you see this, I'm telling the AI to play back to me what I've just kind of outflowed. What is the purpose of this here? It is to research, I guess, initially research how you do that with IA, how you can prompt it and direct it. Ultimately, I think we want to come up with some skill. So I do have some context knowledge here of like what the outcome is. Like I want an agent skill. But if I didn't know that, I could have said to it, what do you think the outcome should be? And actually ask it. And so then it's going to write out the README and it will tell me the README. And I'll read the README and I'll be like, oh yeah, this sounds, or even some of it's long, and tell it to distill the README back to me. And it even tells me it captures the core purpose. Like in 1 or 2 sentences, I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's good. And then I'm going to come to and say, okay, let's go and do research. So off it goes and does a whole bunch of research. Now, this is quite narrow, but it is even going to ask me multiple choice questions about the research. And by the way, I would say one other comment is that my experience of the coding tools, which you don't need to use for coding, like Claude CLI, maybe because I've loaded the brainstorming skills, I don't know whether it's that, or Codex on the command line when I've loaded superpowers, they're a lot better, in my experience, than Claude or ChatGPT when you're just in the classic user mode where you just prompt, when they're in their normal desktop or web app. For some reason, the CLI tools, maybe because they're designed for coding, are much better at doing this kind of like asking me questions at the beginning. So it's asking me like, what should the output of this research look like? I'm saying A, I'm giving it answers. One, should the research focus on any particular area? And look here, I don't even know. I just say whatever you think is relevant. You know, I don't care. And then it goes off and does research. It does a whole bunch of research, and then it comes back and it writes and I'm telling it to write a research document or something, right? And it writes this research document, and it then tells me the summary of the research. And I say, okay, you know, and I said, and I'm at this point, I'm like, I often find another point about AI is it's quite useful to build things quite quickly, but don't build the whole thing. Build a prototype or something simple, and then you quite rapidly learn what was mistaken or worked in that. You know, it's quite cheap to build again. So I then it asked me some question about what I want to build. Like, do I want to build a voice extractor or a write like me skill? And then we do that. And my other rule for myself is whenever I start thinking, oh, maybe I'm not sure about this, maybe I need to research this more, my general rule is to like no and actually get it built. Like get something built and try it. Because I learned so much more from that than like speculating about the perfect thing. So in the end, this did build the whole skill. And you know, even more was like, there was a moment here, like sometimes get quite indecisive. I think maybe most people do. But there's a point where I need to give it text from me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go and select my best writings. Like it wants my best writing. And then I just had this idea, I can just point it at my whole website. You know, this kind of thing you can do with AI, that just point it to my website and say, you go and find the best samples, you know? That's another thing that is very effective when you don't know. And just, it went off and like found me 5 quite good essays, actually, you know, saved me a whole bunch of time. I just gave him my whole website to go through. And, you know, then it did this, it wrote out my kind of tone of voice. Now, I'm saying all of that because that was a mini version. But if we went back to like the AI sales funnel, you really want to start out by having it distill, like it's going to ask you questions about Datopian, like what is it that's actually happening today? Like without that context, building an AI sales funnel abstract, like building it from scratch is actually not so helpful. I would be like much more like, okay, ask me questions to get clear on what's happening today. Let's identify some pain point. That's what a business analyst would do. Like, what is your actual problem? A consultant. Okay, let's now zero down on that and like try and build an improvement to that and then iterate from there. Now, I'm just saying, I don't know whether AI would say what I just said, but it would be the way I'd beginning the process would be like actually doing the business kind of context. And then from there, coming to do research about how we can improve it and then implementing it. And I would be emphasizing on to the AI as we went along, which is we want to do something as a prototype. We want to do this fast. We want to learn. I don't want to be, this is not a multi-month implementation. I'm not writing a strategy document for a Fortune 500 company. So that's the kind of practical element that I find of it for me that then makes it a lot better.
First of all, I like the part with the questions. I probably want to try this out. I haven't so far tried it out, but it sounds amazing because I'm also finding it difficult sometimes to make a decision or restrain the direction I'm going into, but to introduce some sort of constraints more explicitly maybe, or even, I don't know, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, we all know the better the prompt, the better the outcome will be.
Yeah, and you can bootstrap. What I'm trying to emphasize here, by having the AI act like it's the business analyst and ask you questions about the business need and context at the beginning, you're creating those constraints. You don't need to come with that knowledge. You can simply boot. But what's a mistake at the beginning, I would say sometimes say, build me an AI sales funnel. Well, it will go off and just give you a generic answer.
Generic, yes.
From the internet and get confused because there's such a big possibility. Whereas if you start telling it like, I'm a startup of this size, this is the kind of product we have, this is the current setup we have, this is, you know, we don't have a chat on our we don't have, for example, a chat bot on our website, you know, and it can give advice about whether you should do that, but you've built a lot more useful constraint and context to give advice in.
Yes, Definitely. And I started investing more time into building the context in the beginning, and I can see how this is helping. And I think for the sales funnel in particular, I didn't start with the generic prompt, but what I often do is I ask ChatGPT or whatever tool I'm using to do the SCQH
With
with
you,
me.
with
Yes, with
yeah,
me.
that's
Yes.
great. And that's fantastic. And that is really, really useful. I now call that the motivation.md document. I mean, rather than calling SCQH, I call it the motivation for why we're doing the project. Often
Mm,
a README describes, I have a vision or a README document which describes the outcome. Normally I want 3 documents at the beginning of a project, depending, but basically, or 2. I want a motivation, which is the SCQH, which is often the business context and the need.
hmm
And I want a vision or a README which says the outcome that I want.
mm,
In a way, it's more like a richer form of the hypothesis. Because sometimes I'm okay with just having the SCQ essentially in the motivation document. I don't know there's no point doing a hypothesis because all I have is the question. There's no point saying what the sales
mm,
looks like yet because I haven't done the research. But I often
mm,
build the motivation, what I'm calling the motivation document, because that's the SCQ, situation, complication, question. And then the README or vision, often I put it in README. Later on in the project, the README will become the actual, like, how to use this tool or what to do or the executive briefing. And the vision will stay in a document, which was the vision of like what the, what we're trying to do here. But
mm,
basically, those 2 documents, maybe we could just call it the vision and the motivation. And the vision, essentially, the hypothesis, often worked through, are the key starting points for then any implementation work. When you're then going to go and actually task the AI, not normally to go and implement directly. Then at that point, it's like, let's brainstorm an actual implementation plan. Given this, how will we build it? Kind of thing. And in some cases, you can short circuit that if you've already got that from some other process. Like, if you're a very good coder and you already know what tool you're trying to build, you might just be able to write the README. You don't need the motivation. You're just like, here's the README. This is what I want my tool to look like at the end. And then you go off and you basically brainstorm and plan and build.
mm.
But yeah, so that's and actually in Datopia we have an internal prompts repo, Datopian prompts, which I think actually has some of this instruction in it, but not very well distilled into a skill yet.
Mm, mm,
Anyway, I think for today, that's pretty good. And we could come to kind of memory in the next episode of how, AI memory and agent memory. But we've touched on it today. A crucial point I mentioned several points is you're getting the AI to write out during this process documents. I like Markdown documents on my local disk, but you can use Google Docs. You could use Word documents, anything your agent can talk to that you like editing and reading in. Just Markdown documents are super token efficient and so on. Small call outs to Flower Show here if you ever want to publish those Markdown documents. But basically, that's even memory. That's one way you're distilling this stuff, capturing it so that you can reboot the agent again or the AI again with that context. And even for the AI agent, it tends to, even during the process, I can't prove this, but my sense is when it does that checkpointing and distills things, it actually is helping the AI agent, even in a given thread, to sort of have something that is a almost compaction, like a kind of condensation of what it's already done so far in the thread. So, I really recommend that tip. So anyway, if you're liking these things and you want to hang out more with Daniela and I, hit subscribe, follow along on the Datopian channel, mainly AI Learn Today at the present. And also you can subscribe on Substack. And and also post any questions or comments. We'd love to have ideas for future episodes. Also your suggestions about how you do this kind of prompting. We'd love to know that. So we look forward to hearing you next. Bye-bye from us today.
Bye.